All right, let's just get straight into it. Blockbuster day in the NBA. Huge trades going on. Elon, what are your initial thoughts on today's day?
Yeah, this called for an emergency podcast. We had to just discuss this. The NBA was just blown up. James Harden got what he wanted. He got his wish. He wanted to go to Brooklyn from the start. That was where he wanted to go, and it took a few months. It took him to lose to the Lakers. It took him to go out on an interview and publicly say it for it to happen. Once that interview happened, once he gave that interview, it was obviously just a matter of time before it was going to happen. And then, as we saw all the reports coming in today, we knew it was sooner rather than later. The trade offer was a bit crazy. It was crazy for both sides. Both sides, you know, Houston got a lot of stuff in return for Harden, and Brooklyn got the prized possession. Brooklyn got James Harden. What were your thoughts on the trade?
Yeah, my initial reaction was once James Harden gave that interview, we knew something was going to happen very, very, very soon. You had DeMarcus Cousins and John Wall saying, like, what the hell's wrong with you? Why are you giving up? You're not even trying. They were not happy, and I'm sure most of the other players in the Rockets locker room were also very unhappy with Harden saying those things during his interview. We knew this trade was going to happen. We didn't think it would happen, early on in the season. We thought maybe, Houston, if they would wait a bit, maybe things would get better in Houston. Maybe John Wall, James Harden, DeMarcus Cousins, maybe they'd get a bit more chemistry. But yeah, Woj dropped another bomb today, and I was caught by surprise. I'm also a bit surprised that it was a 4-team deal and not just just a straight up 2-team trade or even a 3-way deal. I was kind of surprised that Cleveland kind of found their way in there, and that the third team would be Indiana. We just have to see how do the other teams in the NBA and specifically the East, how do they react? This puts Brooklyn has a huge advantage, depending on what happens with Kyrie, because that's a whole other situation that we might have to have an emergency episode on. But this has really shaken up the NBA and made the East into a powerhouse.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to know, what were your thoughts from what the Rockets pulled in? Was it enough? Do you think that they got a fair share for giving up a superstar, a Hall of Famer, all-time great in James Harden? Do you think they could have gotten more? Do you think that maybe they could have done better with a Philadelphia 76ers trade? There was a rumor that Houston really wanted Ben Simmons and a few of their other young guys like Tybal and Tyrese Maxey. And so do you think that this was the best trade offer in the end for the Rockets? What were your thoughts on that?
I think I would prefer to trade with Philly. Ben Simmons and Tyrese Maxey being the star acquisitions from that trade. I just don't think they got enough in return from the teams involved. You got Victor Oladipo, Dante Exum, you got a bunch of picks, but most of those picks are from Brooklyn, and they're going to be contenders for the next few years. And those first round picks might just be late first rounders. I'm not sure how much help that's going to give Brooklyn in the future.
Yeah, exactly. For people who haven't seen the trade yet and haven't been on NBA Twitter yet, I'll just quickly go over the trade. Brooklyn got James Harden. Houston got Victor Oladipo, Dante Exum, Caruth, and they got 4 first-round picks and 4 swaps. And then Cleveland got Taurean Prince and Jared Allen, and Indiana got Karis LeVert. It was a big 4-team trade. And I sort of agree with you. As crazy as it sounds for a team to get 4 first-round picks and 4 pick swaps, I still don't think they got enough. They came out of this with Victor Oladipo, who is a fantastic player, but he's also 28 and on an expiring contract and can leave by the end of the season. I think that although they got an insane haul in draft stock and like crazy draft picks and all that stuff, and they're going to be set for the future in that capacity, they didn't really get a player that they can build around. I guess they're going to be building on Christian Wood moving forward. I would assume that's their plan, but you had trade offers from Philly. You can get Ben Simmons, who is a bona fide star, a defensive All-NBA defensive player. You could have potentially tried trading with Boston to get Jaylen Brown, who's also having a phenomenal season, a very, very good young player. Maybe they try calling up Washington, getting Bradley Beal, and get Victor Oladipo is great. Don't get me wrong, but if that's your centerpiece around the trade, I don't think that's enough for giving up a all-time scorer and an all-time offensive gifted player like James Harden. I saw all the draft picks coming in, and I was blown away by how much draft capital Brooklyn had to offer, and that's why they brought in Cleveland to this deal to get more draft picks. yet they still didn't really get one centerpiece for James Harden, which surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, Oladipo, he's an all-star, but he's not a superstar. He's not on that James Harden level. One of the things that could benefit Houston is, maybe this trade kind of, unites the Rockets. There was a lot of issues with Harden in the locker room. Maybe after this trade, the players are saying, everyone wants to be on this team. Everyone wants to play for Houston. Maybe, this helps their chemistry out going forward. I've also seen reports that teams are inquiring about PJ Tucker. So the Rockets could still have some more moves to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that Houston's done just yet. I think they can easily also flip Victor Oladipo to another contender who wants to get that one extra piece going into that playoff push. And PJ Tucker, I think, will be moved. Eric Gordon, I think, is another piece that could be moved. Who knows? John Wall could be traded by the trade deadline if he rejuvenates his career and proves that he's healthy and ready to compete. So I really don't think that this is their final move. I think they're just getting started. They have a new front office team in there. They're going to really want to make their own imprint on this team. They brought in Christian Wood. He's clearly there for the long haul. Everyone else, though, I think is up for grabs. It's going to be a little bit of a fire sale when it comes to the trade deadline, in my opinion. What about the Nets, though? Do you think that the Nets gave up too much? Do you think that it was worth it for them?
It's tough to say. I think they gave up They gave up a lot of their depth, that's for sure, giving up Jared Allen, Karis LeVert. But, as people were saying, sometimes it's not always the depth that wins you championships. Sometimes it just is superstars that wins championships for you. So even though, you lost your young guys like Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, your big three, or you could say big 2.5 for now. Who knows what's going on with Kyrie? Your big 2.5 could really give you a deep playoff run and be contenders from the East. But personally, I don't think Brooklyn's done with their moves. If they kind of figure out what's going on with Kyrie, I think he might be the next one to be shipped. You could trade him for a center or just for some more depth.
Yeah, this whole team is a little weird to me. We say in basketball, especially, talent wins you championships, and it's really, especially in playoffs, you can go 8-man deep, and that's really all you need. But there's so many flaws in this roster still. I mean, other than Kyrie, who there's legitimate talks online and speculation that he might retire as soon as this season, which is crazy. No one knows what's happening with Kyrie. He might come back and try to give this team one last shot, and this might be one last reason for him to play out his NBA career. But other than that, they still don't have a backup ball handler. They gave up Karis LeVert, who was their ball handler off the bench after losing Spencer Dinwiddie. They gave up Jared Allen, who was their backup center or starting center based on the game. And they don't really have a backup center now, who is Nicholas Claxton. So they lost a lot of depth. And let's not forget that Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden are three of the highest usage rate players in the league. They all need the ball in their hands. James Harden is notorious for not moving off ball. He'll stay in one spot. When he has the ball, he'll dribble the ball for around 10, 20 seconds and then either shoot or pass out of a double team. Kevin Durant is fantastic and he's a fantastic defender, but a backcourt with Kyrie and KD, who are both known for not being good defenders, that's a defensive liability. Are they a championship competitive team? I don't think they're there yet. Are they going to have a few moves to make down the line? They have to have that, because for now, if Jeff Green is an essential bench player and an essential member on that roster, you're in trouble. No disrespect to Jeff Green. He's better than me, but Jeff Green cannot be an essential piece for a title contending team. That just shows how many flaws there are on that roster. Who's your backup point guard? Who's your backup ball handler? Bruce Brown? Karis LeVert was so essential, not only because he can handle the ball off the bench, but he can also just provide scoring. Their bench is so diminished as of now. I really think that they gave up a lot of their whole future, and I don't think that their present is good enough to justify that. I don't think they're going to end up with the title. Either they have to make more trades, or they're still going to be a little bit disappointed at the end of the season.
Yeah, I saw the ESPN post on Instagram saying Brooklyn's potential 5 starting lineup, and you look at the lineup: Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and you have Jeff Green. So there's obviously one imposter among us.
Listen, don't get me wrong. Still, they have 3 of the top NBA top players in the league. But if your wing defense is Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Joe Harris, there's going to be a lot of perimeter players scoring on you. And that could be scary, especially coming into playoffs when teams can really, really brainstorm and strategize against your team for a 7-game series, prepare for a long series. They're going to expose those weak spots and those weak points in your roster. And you spoke a little bit about how good those draft picks can be because they have such good, or how bad those draft picks will be because they have such top end talent. But those draft picks go on until 2027. And KD, Kyrie, and James Harden are all going to be free agents in 2023. Kyrie will be 32 and may have been retired by then. He may not be playing basketball by then anymore. KD is going to be 35 by 2023. Harden is going to be 34. Not everyone ages as well as LeBron. Not everyone plays as a top player in the league by their late 30s. Those draft picks that they're giving up from 2023 and on, which are, I think, 3 or 4 of those picks, it can end up being a previous Brooklyn Nets catastrophe back when they traded for Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. We saw how bad it caused that team for the future, and they didn't win a title. I'm afraid that if they don't win a title, they're setting themselves up for that same results that from that Paul Pierce Kevin Garnett trade.
Yeah, and as you mentioned the Boston Celtics Brooklyn Nets trade from when was it 2013. That can honestly be Houston's best case scenario. That this trade does not work out for Brooklyn. Brooklyn just gave up 4 first rounders, and they basically turned into this decade's Boston Celtics, carrying all those picks that you could use for to trade for assets. You see them turn into another OKC. Just it's another team hoarding picks.
Yeah, I think that long term is a disaster. Hopefully they can win a championship so they can justify it. I'm a Raptors fan, and so when I saw them raise that Larry O'Brien trophy, you can justify the means. You can justify trading DeMar DeRozan to get Kawhi, and so you can hopefully, if the Brooklyn Nets can also hoist that trophy at the end of the season, they can justify trading up their whole future for James Harden and that trophy. But if they don't, that's just a disaster, and their fans are going to be very, very upset. Once that big three, once those contracts expire. Do you think though that they can win the championship? Do you think that they're favorites to come out of the East? Do you think that they're favorites to win the title, beat the presumed favorites in the Los Angeles Lakers? Do they have enough to win the championship this year?
I don't know. It's a bit tough to say. I mean, the East is just basically a four-team race right now. There's a huge drop-off between what people think the top 4 seeds will be and the rest from 5 to 10 or whoever is in the play-in tournament. I think it's safe to say that Philly, Milwaukee, the Celtics, and the Nets will be top 4. How that order finishes, we don't know. But contenders, I'm not sure. It's just really tough to say. I think we have to see what happens with Kyrie first before we can say this Brooklyn team, they're coming out of the East. It's a locker room distraction. It affects their depth. It affects their chemistry. So before that situation gets sorted out, it's really hard to see if the Nets are the favorite to win the East.
So let's assume Kyrie stays. Let's assume he comes back to how he's been playing, and they have their big 3 with Kyrie, Harden, and KD. In that situation, are they title contenders? Are they coming out of the East even? What do you think?
I think so. They just have a lot of scoring threats, a lot of options to use. Obviously, they do lack in defense. They do have some flaws with their roster. However, the amount of scoring potential that they have on offense, I think that outweighs their defensive woes.
I hear that. I still think I made this pick in our first episode with our season predictions. I said Philly was going to come out of the East. I've seen how they've been playing so far. After seeing the Brooklyn Nets roster, I haven't seen them in action yet, but I see just their roster on paper. I still think that Philly's coming out of the East. I don't think that Brooklyn has anyone to stop Embiid. I think that whichever Philly guards are going off that night, whether it's Ben Simmons, whether it's Tyrese Maxey, whether it's Seth Curry's hitting 9 threes or Danny Green like the other night hit 9 or 10 threes, I don't think that Brooklyn has any of the perimeter defense to stop that. I think that they're going to be lacking a lot of depth between Boston, Philly, and Milwaukee. I can't see Brooklyn beating any of those teams in a 7-game series. I think that all the other teams have assets, have pieces to throw at Brooklyn. Brooklyn doesn't have the right pieces, whether it's defense, whether it's specific roster holes or anything else. I can't see them coming out of the East. It was a splashy move. They got that big name player. They got James Harden, the mega superstar. But we also can't forget that James Harden hasn't had much playoff success. He did happen to be on the team that gave Golden State the biggest challenge, but he never made the finals. He never got past that hump. He's notorious for choking in the playoffs. And so it's nice to rely on him, and maybe it'll be different when he's not the best player. Kevin Durant's obviously the best player on that team. But Harden hasn't gone over the hump. There are other teams who have a lot of strengths in their roster that can expose Brooklyn's weaknesses and that can very easily counterattack Brooklyn's weaknesses. I don't see them competing for a title, let alone coming out of the East. As crazy as it says, in a league where there aren't really many big threes, a few years ago it was all about whoever has the best big three is going to win the league. Now it's more so about having top two players and a really real quality roster around them that complements those two pieces. I don't even think that these three players complement each other, let alone the rest of their roster. I think there's too many flaws, too many weird pieces. You're putting a lot of pressure on Steve Nash, a first-time head coach, who, don't get me wrong, has been great, but it's a lot of pressure to put on a first-time head coach to make the most out of these three very, very high usage rate players to make it out of the East.
So, Ilan, who do you think is the winner and who's the loser from this trade? It could be any teams involved. It could be teams not involved. What are your thoughts on that?
For me, the winner of the trade is the Indiana Pacers. They gave up Victor Oladipo, who was rumored to anyways be on his way out of Indiana. He was on an expiring contract. Rumors had it that he wasn't happy in Indiana. He wanted to be more of a focal point on the team, wanted to be, his team. And they gave up Victor Oladipo, who's 2 years older, for Karis LeVert, who's on a 3-year contract. He's 26 years old. He fits a lot better with the timeline-wise with Sabonis, with Miles Turner, and Malcolm Brogdon. And I think that they got a lot more long-term security. They got another young piece who has very, very similar stats to Victor Oladipo. I think his per 36 numbers are even better than Victor Oladipo's. They gave up an expiring contract to get a younger player on a longer contract, a 3-year contract, for equivalent production or even better. So for me, the Indiana Pacers won that trade.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how Indiana just kind of snuck their way into to this blockbuster deal. I have to agree with you. I think Indiana, they're definitely a winner. Flipping Oladipo for Karis LeVert. I would say Brooklyn is still a winner, depending on they have a winner, but with like an asterisk mark, depending on the whole Kyrie situation. If they could really, if they could convince Kyrie to stay, or if not, they flip Kyrie for some other players. I think that they could turn into a winner. But also down the line, if this doesn't work out, I think Houston just absolutely fleeced the Nets if this trade does not work out. So obviously we won't know if they're a winner for a couple of years, but they do have the potential to be a winner of this trade. Who do you think is a loser though? I think a lot of the teams might be in a bit of shock that Brooklyn was able to pull off a trade of this magnitude. Who do you think has to make a move, or else they're screwed for the rest of the season?
For me, the loser is Steve Nash. He's put himself into a very, very hard situation, or he didn't put himself, but the Brooklyn Nets management put himself into a hard position to be in. Not only is he a first-time coach, not only does he have championship aspirations, but now he has to manage 3 insane personalities in one locker room. Kevin Durant might be the most sane person between those 3 guys. James Harden, I think we can all agree that he's not a good teammate. Between him and Russell Westbrook after that trade, Westbrook was coming up to practices early. He was engaged, and although that may not have brought such good results on the court, he was still active in those practices, whereas James Harden was legit not invited to his practice today. They told him to stay home after not coming to practices in the training camps. And Steve Nash is not going to have to manage between that and also with Kyrie Irving, who no one knows what's happening with him. He was seen with leaked videos at some sort of club with his family members at some birthday party. The NBA is investigating this whole video. There's rumors that he might retire. No one knows when he's going to come back. No one knows if he's going to play again. So for Steve Nash, I feel bad for you. But for me, he's the loser of the trade. What about you?
One of the teams that honestly comes to mind is the Milwaukee Bucks. They made their moves in the offseason, trading for Drew Holiday, losing George Hill and Eric Bledsoe in the process. But I think they're just looking at this trade and they're like, damn, like now what? Philly is really good. Watching Embiid yesterday play against the Heat, he looks unstoppable. And now you have this big 2.5 in Brooklyn, and Milwaukee's just like, damn, like what do we do now? They didn't really have any other pieces that they could really move to get another superstar, more depth. This really hurts their chances at a title run for however long. James Harden is still under contract. What's KD's contract in Brooklyn?
I think he's on contract for another 3 years until 2023.
Yeah, this core is going to be there for a while, which really hinders their chance of winning a championship. So I think at the moment they're a loser on the sideline. And you could also say, the Knicks are losers because Brooklyn just becomes more relevant while the Knicks are gonna nick.
One other winner I want to point out, I think, was Andre Drummond. It might seem that I might be a little insane because Cleveland just traded for another young center to take away some playing time from Andre Drummond. But I think that this just ensured that he's on his way out of Cleveland, and anyone on their way out of Cleveland is a winner in my books. I think he's the next big trade candidate. He's an expiring contract. Cleveland just got a younger center. Jared Allen's only 22 years old. He fits a lot more with this roster with Colin Sexton, Darius Garland, and Isaac Okoro. He fits with the timeline of that team. And I think moving forward, Jared Allen is their center of the future, which means Andre Drummond, they're going to try getting some sort of assets for this expiring contract. They don't want to give him up for nothing. And I can see a lot of teams who want to make that push by the trade deadline, and they want to make that either that playoff push or they want to put their team over the top to prepare themselves for a title run. I can see them trading and giving up some assets for Andre Drummond, whether it's second-round draft picks, a first-round draft pick, who knows. So I think that Andre Drummond is going to be a winner because he's getting himself off of Cleveland, off the Cavaliers, out of a losing situation, although they've been surprising teams this year, out of the city of Cleveland, probably to a contender. So kudos to you, my man. Good for you, Andre Drummond. You're also on this trade.
And here I have a question for you. Where does Bradley Beal fall? With all this drama, do you think he's the next superstar on his way out of his current team?
Yeah, we spoke about that last episode. I think he's on his way out. I think Washington's getting ready for them to ship him out, and I think they're another winner of this trade. They saw what the price is for a superstar in his prime is, and the superstar doesn't have locker room issues. The superstar doesn't disappear from practices, doesn't call out his team and say he doesn't want to be there yet. It might change. So I think that they might want to jump on this opportunity before he gets upset, before he starts calling out his team that he wants to get traded. And right now, the going price for a superstar in his prime is 4 first-round picks, 4 pick swaps, and other young pieces. Granted, Bradley Beal isn't on that James Harden level, but he also provides a lot of other pluses. He's a better defender. He doesn't have those locker room issues. So I can easily see Washington using this as a model for what they want to get moving forward for a Bradley Beal trade.
Well, thank you guys very much for joining us for a special emergency podcast episode of Losers Ball. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but if you're not following us on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, please do so at Losers Ball Pod. We love posting content. We love interacting with our fans, and we would love to hear what you guys have to say, especially about this trade, about basketball, whatever it may be.
Yeah, let us know on Twitter, on Instagram, or on TikTok who you think won that trade. Anytime there's some big news, we'll come out for an emergency podcast. But if not, then we'll be posting every week, every Tuesday. So make sure to look out for us every Tuesday on Spotify or any other platform you listen to podcasts on. Happy buckets to everyone. I can't wait for more big NBA news to come because this is just the start. The NBA season has just begun. We're going to get into the crux of things. I can't wait for a good NBA season.
Happy buckets. We'll see you Tuesday.